Welcome to Hashknife Hangouts, episode 7. It's a little crazy. We've already been doing this for about 2 months now. So, yeah, I know you just hold on. The big thing is today I think we're going to go over a little bit of safety, especially working on the ranch. We were discussing that a little bit last night during some shoot episodes. And the big thing is, if you want to see what I have to say on social media, check me out on Twitter at HashknifeKid, on Facebook at CB Carpenter, and then obviously Dad with all of his humor videos and anything else. You can find him at Hashknife Ranch and Enterprises, which I kind of ghost as a administrator.
PAO we call you.
Yeah. Public affairs, yeah. Well,
yeah.
Not a great job, but hey, it is what it is. So with
Somebody's
that,
got to do it because nobody else can.
Yeah, well, I guess that's true too. So I'll turn it over to you for safety.
Okay, well, safety is one of those things that it's always in the back of your head. And the older I get, the more it's in the back of my head and in the forefront of my head. But had an incident yesterday actually happened while I was feeding. We've got a couple of bulls, or all the bulls, and a couple of little yearling stud colts that we're gonna, I'm gonna try them, check them out, see which one we're gonna keep. And your mother and brother are trying to talk me into keeping them both as studs, so that God knows why. It's one of those things. Two studs. I just hate having studs. I mean, they're necessary, but God Almighty, a stud life is not a good life. So you got to put a lot of safety stuff around them too. But anyway, I got to feed these guys, and those replacement heifers are all around our, this double baled feeder that we've got. Right. And so I'll probably get a shot of this sometime and maybe put it on, but kind of this feeding routine. But when you get two bales on the front of that tractor together, you got about 2,400 pounds. And you can do this, but you keep the bales low, so just off the ground, so the center of gravity is low on this tractor, because the tractor's it's a big boy, it weighs about somewhere in the neighborhood of 14,000 pounds. So I come up to the gate, and of course they're all right there, and they really didn't need fed because they hadn't completely cleaned it up, but they needed to have more feed put in so they can have free feed. And I lifted the bales up, the arms on the front end loader, was holding it with a grapple fork, picked it up so it goes over the top of the gate and go through the gate. Of course, they're not hungry, so they're looking at, hey, I think something's better on the other side of the fence. And so they all start squirting out. Normally, they never do that. They'll always stick right with the hay, especially if there's snow on the ground. And right now, there's hardly any. And so they start squirting out and getting out. And I'm like, all right, so what? I'll get them right back in. And I let them go, but I'm watching them. And I'm making sure I don't run into one of them, and hit them with this tractor. And so as I'm going, I'm driving it really slow, 2.5 miles an hour probably. Low gear, and I don't put the deals back down when I pass over the top of the fence and miss the gate. I left it up, which was stupid, and I turned like this to look out the back window to see just what was going on back there, and I think I inadvertently turned that wheel just enough that tractor, when I turned back, it was level and it was coming up. And I was at about almost a 45 degree angle when I turned back, and I can feel him just kind of picking me up, and I'm being picked up, and I went, oh crap. So I turned the wheel to the right real sharp, and that brought everything back down. And then I put that load back down close, because it's, God, it was probably 7 foot in the air. And then I'm like, oh, that was close, because I just about tipped over this tractor on its side, level ground, slow speed. I mean, there's nothing risky about it. It's just that I wasn't paying attention, and I normally always bring that back down, but at the same time, I had all those crowded around there. I don't want to bring it down onto somebody, which you're not going to if you're going to do it slow. But that was close. I'm thinking, oh my God, Brandon, that's all you need to do is now you got to hopefully you do the minimum amount of damage, and you got an engine laying on its side, a tractor on its side. You got to get either a couple neighbors to come over with tractors, or a wrecker and pick that thing, from town, pick it back up, and hope you haven't damaged or destroyed an engine. It had me, I wasn't shaken, because it wasn't really super, super dangerous, because it wasn't like, going high speed, but just that slow motion. And like, I was more concerned with how much damage it was going to do if I did this and put a tractor out of commission, and what it's going to cost. So, and you're like, wow, were you belted in? Well, no, it wasn't belted in. It's a tractor.
Yeah.
So,
well, I was watching the videos again this morning, because I was doing editing for some shorter episodes and stuff like that for YouTube. But another thing too was, I said something about the glass, and you're like, well, it's not that, it's the engine. I was like, and I didn't finish the thought. And going back to it, I think that's important to keep in mind too, is the other things that could hurt you, because worst case scenario, you get killed or something like that, or the other person, whoever's driving it in that situation, could also get seriously injured or killed. Just like we talked about, there's been a couple farmers that I've seen on social media in the Midwest that they've also died.
Farm ranch accidents around equipment is something that never seems to go away. It's pretty high. And you do dumb things as a kid. I can remember we had a grinder mixer, which we would feed in flakes of alfalfa hay and grain. We'd get wheat, barley, and we were had some finish hogs there at the North Ranch. And so you'd mix up a bunch of grain and a concoction of wheat, barley, hay. That was it mainly. And then we put some mineral in there, for them. We just add it into their feed. Great deal. Hated those days, because it was dusty and loud, and it's running off of a power takeoff, the PTO, off the back of a tractor. So you'd hook it up, hook the tractor in, and you stab it into this PTO, and those things spin at like 540 RPM, generally, or you can go up to like 1,080, depending on what speed you've got that thing turning, or inside the tractor. 540 revolutions per minute, and all of those PTOs usually have a guard on them. Just a piece of tubing, and it just kind of flares out on the connection end, so that everything's covered. That's got things that you could stick something into. The universal joint, it sits like this, and it's kind of rolls like a chain link. Well, it's got a cover over the top of that, so that you can't get something stuck in there, and you get bored. And as a kid, I can remember being 10, 11 years old, and this thing is turning. Well, the cover was broken, and it would make a lot of noise, and it would rattle. So I reach over there and grab it and hold it while it was spinning on the inside of it. It's like, oh yeah, or you start out slow, and incrementally you work up. You're like, okay, you grab a stick, and I'd lay it on it, and I'd find out which way it's turning. You could see, and it's like, okay, if it's turning away from you, I can lay this stick on here. And you're making noise and dinking around, because you're waiting for this stuff to grind before you feed more into it. And then if it was turning towards you, that thing could grab it and would flip it out of your hand if it caught just the edge of a little bit of a open spot on there. And you'd figure out which way it's turning away from you. I can lay my hand in a glove on there, and it'll spin. Stupid stuff. That's exactly how. I've seen. I was at EMT, and you go through a lot of stuff, and you see farm accidents, ranch accidents, and they're all called farm accidents because usually around equipment.
Yeah.
And people who literally, their arm and body are wrapped around a PTO shaft, deader than a doornail. And it's like, I don't care how big you are, how strong you are, you cannot stop that. And it's like dumb things that have happened, and it just makes you shudder thinking back.
Right. Well, and that's another thing too, I didn't even think about, but like when Austin was going through EMT school for a short bit, he was showing me some pictures, and one guy, for whatever reason, they had an auger. They were doing post holes like we do post holes all the time. And we've always been really adamant about just stay clear of it until it's out of the hole, then start working. But whatever reason, the guy decided to reach in where the auger was. They had the auger stopped, and he's just going to like pull something out, and grabbed his arm, and it lacerated all the way around. I think they ended
Yeah.
up having to amputate, but it's just simple stuff like that. Like all you have to do is take 5 seconds to pull things out of the hole, set it to the side, do what you need to do, and then do it again. And I think that might go back to another conversation we had last night of just time. We think we need to keep going and keep going. And sometimes it's better to just take 5 to 10 seconds and do it. And then
Yep.
you can go on and do whatever you need to.
Yeah. Who cares how long it takes at that point? How long does it take to heal up or get an arm amputated and never get back?
Yeah, exactly. I
You know,
know
so
mom just asked a question too, and I think I'm not gonna just stop everything, but I think it pertains to what we've got going on right now. And she said, I know Rose has also worked on ranches, so I wonder between her and Brandon what they think is the most dangerous job in agriculture. So I'll open the floor to you first, and then I'll see if I can unmute Rose over here.
the most dangerous thing I can think of at this point is not having enough coffee in the morning when you. No, it's right. Machinery. I think it's machinery really overall, and someone who is not familiar with it, trying to run it, or you're teaching someone, and they feel stressed because again, it's about time management, and everything seems to be, hey, we need to get this job done. We need to get it done. And even when you don't, everybody I think has that kind of that mentality. So I think it's around equipment one, and then new operators feeling stressed and not knowing what to do, and they panic.
Yeah. All right. So Rose is unmuted. So go ahead, Rose.
Well, actually, I think the most dangerous thing is probably working with your spouse.
Not in the moment. I think it's when you go back home. That's when it's dangerous.
Yeah. No, I think I agree with Brandon. It's the machinery. And it's not just tractors and choppers, it's grinders. And I mean, anything that's motor operated, especially at a high rate of speed, has the potential of ripping something off your body.
Yeah.
Well, that goes when I was learning how to work on the swather and stuff too. Like I was only 10, 11, maybe 12. No, I think I was like 10 or 11.
Yeah, and 10 or 11.
Dad and Grandpa were both saying, "Hey, listen, what you need to do." I just muted Rose so she doesn't feel like she needs to talk anymore. But like the first thing you always said was, if you have to do anything with that header, and anybody who's not familiar with what it is, the header is the big spinny thing up front that like helps catch all the grass essentially and cut it. And
the big spinny,
yeah. If you have to do anything with that, just shut it down, and don't feel like you have to go out there. And that was the big thing, because the first thing you did was you told me horror stories, which was probably the best way to do it, because then you're like, this is what can happen. So it scares the daylights out of you.
Right.
So you don't want to do it. And the worst thing that could happen is you lose both arms. Like, okay, well, there you go. And I think that I agree. The machinery is a big thing besides working for your spouse or with your spouse.
Yeah. Well, the scar that takes place with working with your spouse can be lifelong. I mean, I'd rather lose an arm than but think about the small things that you normally you don't until you approach it, like a bench grinder.
Yeah.
What do you do when you turn a bench grinder off or on or off? Either one. That change in speed and that rotation, and like Rose says, that high speed motorized stuff, when that takes off, you're going from 0 to 3,500 RPM or so. And if you've got a crack in a one of the grinding stones, that can come apart and just throw shrapnel right in front. So you stand off to the side, you flip the switch till it comes up to speed, and nothing bad has happened. Now you can start working on it. And the same thing when you shut it off, you stand to the side, shut it down, and when it changes speed, and now it's going to slowly, go down to 0 RPM. But sometimes with good bearings and some of these, it'll take 10 minutes for that thing it'll still be doing. But the point is that change, and that's small things like that you don't think of. Cutting torches, welders, all those kinds of things like that.
Yeah. Well, and I got another private message. Mom is actually a guest today. Thank you, Mom. So she just said another thing is when she worked in PT during college, she had an 18-year-old kid lose both arms, just like how I described.
Really?
Like it happens, and I think it just goes to either carelessness or people not being informed and thinking about the worst thing. And like, man, we like this keeps like kind of hitting all the topics we talked about yesterday, but that goes back to me in the military. Like, what's the worst thing that could happen? And that's how you can kind of prepare yourself and make sure all the safety things are in order, so that you can either make sure things are done the right way or the safest way possible. And Rose has something to ask.
Well, no, I was just going to comment. I think along with the hazards of farm work or military or anything that can be dangerous is that just momentary lapse of attention.
Yep.
Another
thing, getting too comfortable with a task. I just saw that.
There you go. That's a big one. When you are so good at something, or you take for granted because you've done it, hundreds or even thousands of times, you become complacent about what can happen or how you do something, and then you quit looking at what you're doing. Instead of, you just react and you reach over for something instead of looking and then reaching. I mean, it's human nature to do that. We had a conversation in one of the In the Shoot episodes about I don't think you published it yet, but it was about risk and some of the things you do, and skills that you bring to your job, like you're in the military from the ranch. And I can remember when I was working as a warden for the Fish and Game, we did lots of rescues. I mean, I don't even know how many times I pulled people out of the Yellowstone or hanging off of a root ball in high water. I mean, they were rescues, It seems like almost every weekend I'd come home and you'd hear Mom would say, well, how was the day today? I said, well, we rescued a family of 4 and, I had to do it. No big deal. Well, yeah, it's not. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do, right? But I remember this one time I had a family of 4. Their canoe, they had canoed the Yellowstone in like June. And like, I've done that too, and it was really stupid because we had a lot of alcohol on board in college, but they were just out recreating, and the kids were probably, they're in that 7 to 10-year-old range, a little boy and a little girl. And we come around a corner, and here's this family hanging on a big old cottonwood root ball that the cottonwood had fallen over because the bank had undercut, and there are just roots hanging there. You can see the canoe was underneath. You can see once you got up there, they had hit a strainer, rolled it under. They'd all grabbed parts of this root ball and crawled up on it. So they're hanging above the water, but they can't go anywhere. They can't get onto the tree to get out, and it's just too risky, and water's just roiling up around them. And it had happened not that long before we got there, but all of a sudden the guy who's in the jet boat was very good on the jet boat. Very good. He was better than me. And I was one of the better ones because we ran it all the time. But if I had somebody running it, I'd want him doing it. Yeah. And I was bigger and stronger than him. So this worked out. And I get in the back of the boat and he just holds out there. Well, the first thing I need to do is pull Mom off because the kids I think they went in just as they had gone in the canoe. Dad was farthest to the left, the 2 kids, and then Mom on the right. And typical mom mode, she goes, no, take my kids. I'm like, no, I can't. I cannot get them because I can't get to you or get to them past you. And I mean, I had to argue with her about about saving her life. And
that's the thing. They like that. The emotions get into it, and they're not thinking, here's the best way to do it. Because if I do it the way that I want to, people may not get saved. If I do it the way that we should do it, more people are likely to get saved.
Right. Or I can crush you, not because of the water, because of what we're doing.
Yeah.
And, if something goes wrong here, but that's that perspective other than hers. But she was in mom mode, she's like, save my babies. And so I had to argue, and I said, no, you grab my arm, and I pulled her in, got her sat down, I just threw it in there, and then he worked the boat over, and I grabbed, I don't remember, was a little boy or a little girl, and I could just literally grab them by the arm and pick them up and haul them in, and then got Dad, and then everything turned out right. But it's about risk aversion, and I never heard about risk aversion even after that. Even after my career with the Fish and Game, when I got to the refinery, they're nutty about safety, and rightly so. I mean, I'm not saying in a bad way, but you would even bring things to that I would have done with the Fish and Game. They're like, oh, we don't do that. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I can remember we got a dry suit with for rescue with Fish and Game, and it was about, there have been some people go through the ice in the wintertime, late winter, early spring, where you got rotten ice and people are still trying to do stuff when they shouldn't, and people get caught in the ice, can't get up out of it, and they get hypothermia and slip under and they die. So we had done some training, and with these dry suits on the ground, with somebody grab a rope, they harness you up, and you go sliding out there on the ice to them, try to get out to them, and then if you fall through, big deal, you got a dry suit and they can always haul you out. Well, we were doing scenarios and say, okay, what do we do what if it's too far out there? What if you can't get to them? They're like, and time is of the essence. Well, we had a phenomenal helicopter pilot, and they had a Bell Ranger that the Fish and Game had, and we said, hey, I wonder if he could do this. So he's like, yeah, I used to do this all the time in Vietnam. I'm like, awesome, how do we do this? So we collaborated, and he says, all right, and he's giving us safety about static and how you hook up, and because you get,
I'll tell you what, that's something that I have not done it yet. I would like to, but in the Army, it's air assault, and air assault, you do a lot of stuff with ropes and cargo and whatnot. And that's exactly, I had no idea until somebody told me about it, who was air assault qualified, and they said, oh yeah, they talk about static. Like when you hit that line, you go 100%, because the last thing you do is you hesitate at all, and suddenly you get that shock factor from the rotors and whatnot going on.
And it's not just a shock factor, it's an electrocution factor. That's like your brother this summer was on a heli-attacker. He qualified in heli-attack or helicopter attack with fire, and same way, he learned a lot of that stuff, and he knows he did it more than I did, because ours was just, okay, just throw that hook as hard as you can and get
Good
out.
Luck.
Because again, this risk aversion. So we're putting all this stuff together, and I said, well, what do we use for a harness? And the sergeant had a flat, it was about 4-inch wide toe strap with 2 triangular ends on it that was just sewed on. And we're all digging around through stuff. He goes, I got this flat thing, that'd be better than a rope. And who's going to do this? And I'm like, oh, I'll do it. So I get in the dry suit, they hook the helicopter up, he starts to pick up, and they put me in the harness, and all I do is I just slip through this piece of, it's just a big old long band that we've got held down there. So I slip through it under my arms, and I just put my arms down, and helicopter picks me up, takes me out. And we had a guy in the ice, cut a hole in there, and he's in there like he was a victim. And this is the first time we ever did this. And he picks me off the ground, and we're flying out over the lake, and I'm going, ooh, I can feel my fingertips. Starts at both fingertips and works up, and they're tingling, and I can't feel anything. And I, oh, this is a bad idea. But I can't communicate. It's too late.
No,
I'm like, man,
you don't have comms,
Yeah, and no comms at all.
And it's not like he can see you because you're kind of underneath the helicopter.
Well, he could see me. He could see me because this dude was so good. He mounted a convex, about a 8-inch convex mirror. He went ahead and just bolted it out onto the front of the skid so he could fly and watch me through that thing underneath. And of course, everything's backwards because it's, in a mirror. Yeah. But that guy was phenomenal. Wayne Bainzinger was his name. Phenomenal pilot. Anyway, I flew a lot with him at night with doing spotlight patrols and other stories. We, spend a little bit too much time out there. I remember one time we ran out of fuel as we were coming into land at like 2 a.m. Bad ideas, but you're always pushing that limit. But anyway, I get in the water. They drop me down just enough. I'm like, oh man, that feels good. Well, now I got to hook this guy up with a rope, get him lanyarded to me. And so I did that. I give him the high sign, banging on the top of my noggin, and they pick us both up. Now we've got his weight on there, mine, and he's kind of struggling like people would. I mean, we're trying to make it realistic. Yeah. And here I go again. I'm getting just enough feeling back and feel my arms fill with blood again. And we get down, and we're kind of debriefing about everything. Okay, how'd this go? What do you think? And I kind of said everything, and people were telling us what they saw, from the pilot. And I said, one thing I think we need to do is we need to get a harness, because this is what's going on. I said, I thought this was a bad idea about, 30 feet in. And he goes, and they're like, I said, oh yeah, my arms are falling asleep. I didn't know if I had the strength to do it, or if I could even stay in the harness because I'm hanging in it. And they're like, oh, one of them goes, God, I'm glad I didn't do that. I mean, you know, so risk aversion is not so risk when you're not the one involved with it, right?
Oh
so,
yeah, it's a whole lot easier when you're telling people to go do it for you.
So the sergeant goes, good idea. You why don't you do this? You go ahead and research that. So you know how that is. Anytime anybody brings anything up, give them the work to solve it. And rightly so at that point, because I was the one who did it anyway. I started researching. I thought, I had no idea you could get harnesses to do this kind of stuff, you know. And I got one spec'd out and what weight it would take and all of these sorts of things. And of course, they need to be inspected yearly, and you know that would never happen.
Oh yeah, it's like,
so
it's like the
him,
Army.
said, okay,
like we check it, but do we really check it?
check the box.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
But so anyway, I had this harness, and I was trying to be, you know, frugal about it, because you can spend whatever you want to spend on harnesses.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, hey, here's a harness. And he goes, okay, how much? And I said, it's $350 for this harness. He goes, oh no, we're not going to spend that kind of money on that. We'll just keep using this toaster. I'm like, okay. So you know, it's cultural. It's all about time and money, right? So, and as long as you're not the one in the air had that happening to you, I think if he'd have done that, knowing him, there is no way in the world he wouldn't have a harness or two harnesses for him. You know, some genetics just cannot be sacrificed.
All right. So, granted, this is our first time having guests, so I think we'll open the floor to any questions. If you want to chat and send a question through the chat, or raise your hand, I'll let you talk. I know we've only got Mom. Yeah. Okay. Mom and then Rose. Give you a couple seconds, or forever hold your peace.
Yep, that's it. Look at that. Yeah, now they're shy.
Yeah, that's all right. No worries. We have a plan. We have a plan if they don't want to ask anything. Not a big deal. This is good too, because like we said, this is kind of a practice run. I'm glad we only have 2 people in the room, because it's I'm already learning some things right now for future broadcasts. So this is good.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything. So I think we'll go to the next thing of you were saying Grandpa, oh, hold on, most dangerous I guess you, Grandpa Wayne and Hay Wagon. Oh. Yeah.
Oh.
That's a good one. I didn't think about that. Yeah, go ahead. You know more about that than I would.
Well, God, and I forget the man's name now, but they were stacking hay with an Overshot Stacker, which is it's literally, you can use horse-drawn equipment. It was a horse-drawn.
It's like the old school kind of is how people would term it.
Yeah, it's like you have this level platform, and you would drag hay onto it, and then you would pull with a team. You pull this way, and it was on a pulley system, and you would pull and pull hard, and it would hit almost like a
catapult,
where it would hit it and stop suddenly, and then it would throw the hay. Well, as it's low, it's not bad. Well, you stack that hay, and you lay that hay around back and forth so that it will shed water. Well, the higher you go, of course, this is loose hay, and loose hay, if you've been on that stuff, it bounces around. I mean, it's like being on a mattress almost. You can really have a lot of issues with too much bounce. And the guy my grandpa was working with was on the top, and my grandpa told him, he said, hey, he could see that he was getting close to the edge, and goes, hey, you need to stay on the inside. You're getting too close to the edge. This thing could knock you off when that stuff hits, because you got a big pile of hay, and then it hits and the whole thing bounces.
Yeah, makes sense.
And he told him
it's like the physics of it, all the weight gets added to it, more energy, and it kind of yeah,
because you got all this potential energy, and then you throw more to cause that. I mean, it's and he told him a couple, 2 or 3 times, and so Grandpa, he brought more hay up, and he pulled and threw that on there, and he's looking up, and he can't see him. He's like, where'd he go?
Yep.
And he's like, uh-oh. He went around, and here he is laying on the ground, and the Grandpa went up. He said, you all right? He goes, no. And he goes, what's going on? He says, you were right. He says, I come down. He says, I broke my neck. I think my neck's broke. And Grandpa's like, okay, how do you know? And he was explaining, what he felt. And he says, I can't move my legs. can't move my arms. And so he says, what Grandpa says, well, what do you want me to do? And he says, you know, he says, just make me comfortable. Let's roll. If you can roll me over, make me comfortable. And Grandpa says, all right. You know, I didn't kill him outright. And he says, oh, and I mean, I'm listening to this going, oh my God, you know?
Yeah.
I said, what? And he says, what do you want me to go to town? You want me to get some help? And he goes, no. And he said, there's nothing you can do. And I mean, the guy was resigned to it.
Yeah.
He says, I'm going to die here in a little bit. He said, just stay with me, keep me comfortable, and just bullshit with me until I die. And so Grandpa did. He sat there with him until he died. I mean, that's, you know, these are real things that happen.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, what you would think is a day of just kind of some drudgery work turns into something like that, you know?
No, that's a
So,
good point.
yeah, I mean, anything can do that. And then, you know, woulda, shoulda, coulda, right? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, then it, yeah, especially as probably the, you know, the survivor. I don't
right.
know what kind of guilt Grandpa might have had, but that's
Yeah,
something I
like,
know I would have personally been like, man, you know, maybe I should have just told him, come here, get off the haystack or something, you know.
no, and that's exactly what Grandpa did. He's like, I should, you know, and so, you know, he felt guilty that he didn't make him do that, you know. And it's like, you know, as a grown man, you've told him,
Right.
you know, and it
No,
wasn't
and
like he was
that's the thing.
inexperienced at it.
Yeah. Another thought bounced up here. With all the advances in agriculture since the incident that we're just talking about, what are some more beneficial safety features for workers today? Ag vehicles on the road hauling bales, cannot see traffic, etc. So I think if I were to take that on a little bit, I would think while there's a lot of benefits in the newer stuff we've got, like we're not necessarily using horses, we're using equipment and things like that. Sometimes the animals can be unpredictable because hey, they have bad days too, and we just
Right.
don't know it. Then there's other things, just the machinery is convenient and it starts up, but then, you know, maybe there's fires, maybe there's things that happen that you just don't expect. And then of course on the road, there's other people who are unpredictable when you're hauling, I don't know, maybe a semi truck full of hay bales. What are your thoughts on that, I guess?
Well, I think that there's been a lot of things just putting roll cages or roll bars on tractors or equipment, just like what's built into your cars. I mean, we have a lot of safety issues there that you don't even know are there. They're hidden, you know, because they're not aesthetically pleasing. So, you know, there are roll bars, there are things like that, but you know, not knowing, with like your comment about animals and not knowing that they're having a bad day, you may not be paying attention, and you're going to say, okay, we need to do this anyway. And as a trainer, you do that, right? I mean, you work around that and you kind of straighten your attitude out a little bit and say, no, we're going to do this. But that increases the risk a little bit. And that's, to me, is more predictable than humans, because you go down the road, you know, in say a tractor or a swather or any kind of equipment that's larger than normal than a car or moving slower. People are nuts. You can have flashing lights. You can have the orange triangular sign that says, you know, slow moving. You can have all of that stuff. And in spite of it, guess what they do? They're in a hurry. They'll go ripping around you. They'll cut you off. All of those things. So, and then you have to take some evasive measures. I think we talked a little bit one day about the public service announcement about driving trailers during the fall, you know. So, you know, some people you can know and be very good about whatever you're doing or think about those things ahead of time and what you need to do, but it's only as good as what you can do, because that person who's going around you, they may have never even seen a piece of equipment like that before.
Right. No, that makes sense.
It's all Rose about being somewhere now.
Yeah, Rose has a question here or comment.
There. Yeah, I think one thing to keep in mind, especially in farming and ranching, is there is nothing that is completely safe. I had this conversation with my son when he was about 8. He convinced me that sleeping in your bed was safe. And when 3 days later, he fell out of his bed on the point of his shoulder and broke his collarbone.
Well, that's a hard lesson.
So you know, and especially when you're dealing with animals or complex equipment, we've done so much to make them safer, but it's never completely safe.
Yeah.
And that's when you just got to pay attention all the time.
Yep. Always thinking about what could go wrong. What's the worst thing that could happen? And that's one of the things I never really fully appreciated that until I was probably my late 30s. What could possibly go wrong? What's the worst thing that could happen? And that was taught to me. It wasn't something I came up with. Your grandpa Tex would say that to me. He goes, all right, what could happen here? He never really said what's the worst thing that could happen. He said, what could happen? Think ahead. And then he really was saying the same things, but still, I don't think I wasn't really looking forward like 5 or 6 steps ahead. I was maybe looking 1 or 2 steps ahead. What could go wrong, you know? And, and instead of playing that out, it's like, if this happened, what would happen then? What would happen then? What would happen then? So,
well, and that kind of, like, I mean, that's been my job for almost 4 years now. Like, hey, medical guy, we get somebody shot. Like, what's your plan? And like, that's the same thing. Like, oh, hey, I got this plan on how to get a casualty from point A to point B, but what if that's not there? And like our army answer, because we've been in Afghanistan where we have air superiority for 20 years, is we'll just air medevac them. Like, well, what happens when your air's
what if
gone?
you can't?
Yeah, people never think about that. So
yeah, well, the weather doesn't always cooperate. You got to have weather for most of the time and I mean some severe weather. I mean, those guys can fly in a lot of stuff, but you know, we're talking severe stuff. What do you do?
Right. So next thing, I think maybe this might be a little more humorful, hopefully. 5th grader and dynamite. You said that grandpa and great grandpa. So great grandpa was a powder monkey in the mines, you said, right? Way back when.
Yeah,
and then they decided they're just gonna give you dynamite as a 5th grader.
No, it wasn't like that. It was, I mean, you know, most every ranch, there was somebody in the community who could buy dynamite. You know, I mean, they were licensed to buy it, handle it, and they'd get it for you. So, and you could purchase it for, and it was usually like we called it 60% ditching dynamite, where you could blow a lot of rock and stuff. Well, you know, there's always beaver dams. You could blow beaver dams up at that point. Heck, when I was in the Fish and Game, we packed dynamite around with each other. I mean, rolls of it, and you'd bundle a couple together, throw it in a beaver dam where you needed to blow up because it was causing irrigation issues. It was kind of a last resort, but you put a couple of sticks in somewhere, and then you back off and just shoot it with a rifle, and that impact would make it blow. Great solution. Well, Grandpa worked at the Mowat mine there, which is now the Stillwater mine complex. It's a little bit away from that, and in the 50s, and trying to ranch and putting in another 12-hour shift. Everybody does this. You got outside jobs trying to make a ranch work, and he would handle dynamite, where those guys would, by hand, they were doing what they called double jack, where one guy would hold a rod with a bit on it, and another guy would hit it with a sledgehammer, and he'd turn it a quarter turn, they'd hit it, turn a quarter turn. I mean, that is some hard mining, right?
Yeah.
And that was in the 50s they were doing some of that stuff. So, and then they'd bore those holes out at the end of shift. They would go in there, and he would climb down a ladder. He had bib overalls, he said. He would wear that with a wool shirt and bring it down. He'd just filling his coveralls in with that, slide down into those mines, and they'd fill those holes up, and they'd connect, fuse caps, all of that stuff. And then they would blow at the end of a shift so that the next shift could muck out and keep going. And so he learned how to handle dynamite pretty well, and then taught Dad. And then I was like 5th grade. The summer before my 5th grade year, we're in our country, we got some, how that shale rock is. You can't dig through that stuff we've been literally with homemade tools, like an axle of a vehicle.
So we still got them. There's been a time or two where we're like, hey, I'll go a couple rounds on the axle, and then you go.
Yeah, we take a cutting torch and sharpen the end of it so it would dig. And so you're up there, somebody's holding that, and you're hitting that with a sledgehammer to try to break through this shale rock we have up here. and some places it's really close to the surface or at the surface, and it is hard. You can't drill through it. So we had some neighbors and we were putting in a water line, trying to put a water line in, got as far as we could, and just, a backhoe wouldn't cut through this stuff. So my dad, he went to town and got a portable air compressor and a jackhammer. And first time I ever was using a jackhammer, I was too small. I mean, these things are pretty heavy, and so Dad he'd push down a hole every so often down in this trench that we had going, and then we'd drop down dynamite and then light it off, break all that shale, and then a backhoe could come in there and clear it out. And so I was I was 5th grade. It was a summer just before I turned, between my 4th and 5th grade year. And so we got a bunch of ditch and dynamite, a big box of it, 50-pound box in the back of the pickup. We have blasting caps, and those blasting caps are, they're pretty sensitive. But they're the old school ones where they're not electric. They're just, a fuse gets down to them, hits them, it blows them up, and then it blows the dynamite.
Yeah.
And so we know that a full stick of dynamite isn't going to work. It's just not going to. It's way too much and a waste of dynamite. I mean, we don't want to make that big of a thing. And so we kind of figured out what we needed to do, how much, and you never cut dynamite with anything that's going to cause static. So your pocket knife is made out of steel, right? It's carbon steel. That is brass, right? Yeah, you need brass. So but we didn't have a brass knife. So we take your pocket knife, and if you cut slow, then you don't build up static electricity. So we're prepping dynamite, we're prepping these things, and we were looking for something. We found it was actually a chopstick that we had in the drawer, sharp end, and you push that chopstick down into and it's wood, it's not going to get any static, down into this chunk of dynamite, which I think we were cutting the dynamite sticks into, I believe, 1/4 or 1/3 of a stick. I think 1/3 of a stick in length. And so I push it down, and then I'm putting the blasting caps on the fuse, cutting the length of fuse, putting the blasting cap on, and then I'm pushing it down into the chunk of dynamite, and then we'd wrap it with a piece of tape so that it would stay there. And then we're building all these charges and setting them off to the side. And then it was about trying to get the fuse lit. And this was not old fuse, but old technology fuse for, what we could get a hold of.
Yeah.
And we would split the end of the cord, the fuse, because it was about the size of a pencil, maybe a little bit bigger. Mm-hmm. And so we'd cut the end of the cord, and then we would soak it with lighter fluid, and to get enough heat, and then with a lighter, we would light it. And once it got, and you saw it would burn, then it would burn, and you could see it smoking and kind of just burning down towards the end. And we made plenty. It's okay. We made a long distance fuse so that we had plenty of time to get away, even though we're doing all this other stuff, and we line them all up, and neighbors learned how successful we were at this. So they had a bunch of post holes to put in solid shales. So we did the same thing going down there, and I'm just fat, dumb, and happy, 5th grader, cutting dynamite, making charges.
I get to see, hey, you got to experience a regular boom. So that would have made me excited.
Oh, well, and we put the dynamite down.
Your Wi-Fi is going out.
It goes right up the top of the hole. So we put it down in there, make sure it went all the way down with a chunk of wood, and you make sure there was resistance and was about the right length of fuse coming out, because we knew how deep the hole was. And then we would pack in dirt and then slowly just keep tamping that in. And then that would cause the explosion to go out. And it, that, I think we only did that like once, and Dad goes, "Oh yeah, we should probably, we should pack this hole." So now you're, careful not to bang too hard with some dirt on the top of this dynamite and a cap,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there was some risk aversion. We cut slow with that carbon steel knife blade, but you know what? When I got into the seismographing, and after I was out of high school, you'd get a chunk of pipe that was, stuck, mm-hmm. and you do everything you can, and that pipe is expensive.
Oh yeah.
And if you had to, and you got it stuck, you did what you had to do. And we were dealing with 2-foot long chunks of dynamite then that were like, they're about 2 3/8 inches around, and they were encased in plastic, and then you would screw these together. And I've got some pictures around here somewhere where I was holding or putting together I think it was a 24-foot chunk of dynamite, that 24-foot long, and then you'd put in 2 caps that were electric caps, and we had 2 valve stem deals welded onto this stairway, the driller's stand, and you'd put these rolls of cap wire on there, put in, stab it in there with a brass poker, push in these electric caps, and they don't take much to go off, so you're being really careful, and that would just have vaporized all of us. There's two of us to a crew and all of the equipment, but you put that in there, you drop those in, and then you take them both together and use 2 caps in case one didn't work.
Yeah, makes
the
sense.
other one should work. Yeah, right. Because now you don't need 240 pounds of dynamite laying on the ground, or 24 foot. They were 10-pound sticks. So yeah, 240 pounds of dynamite, and you drop that down, and you get so far, and you'd stand back, and everything's tight. With your wires were coming right off of your spools, and then you would just drop it, and you could hear it go zzz, and those things would just spin and just go right down into the bottom of the ground, into the bottom of the hole, and you'd leave those, pull those off, tie them off to a stake, and then the guys that would come by with the geological equipment would push in these probes, and then they'd blow it up. But piece of pipe would get stuck, so you'd sacrifice one of your pieces of dynamite, you'd cut into it, and then you would build a bomb, and you'd scoop out some of this dynamite and make kind of just a long, narrow one, and you'd wrap it in tape, and just, you're just building a bomb, really. Stick a deal in it, and then drop it down the center of the pipe as far as you could get down there, and then you'd torch it off, put a little weight down there so it would go, and then you touch it off, and it would literally just spaghetti blow that pipe up, and then you could save as much pipe as you possibly could.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
So it was, and this is, you talk about cowboying something. I mean, and if in those days, and you guys, I don't think you might hear around some of your bases or something, I don't know, but we used to hear sonic booms all the time with jets, airplanes breaking the sound barrier, and it would go boom, and everything would, and you go, oh, that sound barrier must be, a jet going over. That was common. I grew up like that that was, just busting the sound barrier. Well, they don't do that anymore, but we heard a boom, and everybody, man, they run to the radio, checking in, making sure everybody's okay, because that's the kind of sound it would make. It was risky, and but it's an added risk to something that's already risky when you're on a drilling rig with pipe and
well, and I was gonna say it doesn't help with crews like that. The old man's probably 24 years old, so
22.
22. Okay.
The oldest guy was 22.
It's not like there's a lot of risk aversion anyway with younger guys. So.
No. Yeah, the oldest guy was 22. I was 18, and there was one guy that was like a couple of months younger than me.
Jeez.
And you've got a dozen guys like that are, arguably they're away from home. The drinking age is like 19 at the time, and I looked like I was,
Not that it
25
really today anyway.
At 50, yeah. Well, and so we would drill all day long, and then we'd go to the bar and drink, and we'd be covered in mud. We'd have a beer, and then we'd go and clean up, come back to the bar and drink, and then go to get something to eat and come back and drink some more. Think how risky just that is, just your after work. You'd never do that today. It was crazy, but everybody did that. That was just a culture and a lifestyle. So, you think, the wilder, the better, it makes for good stories.
That's true. All right. I think with that, we'll wrap it up with any questions for any of our 2 guests out there. See if they got anything. Give them a couple minutes just in case.
You'll have to ask. Your mother's not risk averse either, really. She might seem like she is, but she'll probably kill me for asking this question, but because she won't answer. But ask her someday what's the wildest thing she's ever done.
I know the answer to that one.
Marrying me.
What's that?
Marrying me.
It's something like that, I think.
That's fair. Yeah.
I think your Wi-Fi is starting to go out too because Braden's getting on. Oh, Rose
Hey.
came on the net, so
Hello?
hi.
Oh,
Hi. I'm just thinking about all your stories and thinking back when you're younger, until you have some experience and things happening to you, you're immortal.
Yeah.
I think about the immortal things I did, jumping out of planes and stuff. It's Wait, I don't think I'd do it well, I'd jump out of a plane again. But a lot of the other stuff I wouldn't do.
isn't that true though? Your mortality becomes more real the closer you come to the end of your life.
Yes, yeah. And the more real risk feels, I guess.
Right.
I mean, you always know there's risk, but instead of intellectually knowing it, you feel it. And
Yeah, no,
that
that's
makes
right.
a difference. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think some of that comes from previous injuries because of stupid stuff you did that was risky.
Yeah. Best way, some people just have to pee on the electric fence themselves.
Others are just entertained by watching.
Oh, yeah.
Calen, what's the riskiest thing you've ever done now? That since we bring that up and you don't live at home anymore, what's the riskiest thing you ever did growing up
Riskiest thing I ever did growing up. I
don't know about until now?
I honestly, I don't really think I did anything. And my younger brother would be the one that you would ask that question for. I was not the
That's
one
true.
that went out and did stuff.
You were
I've talked to you about this a little bit actually, and I don't know, maybe it is you get older, you see more things, you get experienced, and the other thing too is my field, I see people get hurt regularly, or I deal with them being hurt, so maybe that helps make me kind of come to that realization more. But like the big thing that I think I talked to you about this, I don't know, like a year ago or so, was like when we were going on that moose hunt with Braden, and we had those horses in the back of the trailer, and we're going up the hill, and it was icy, and suddenly we stopped going, and we started going back, and you're like, hold on, boys, and Braden and I were like, okay, we're good. You know how to back up a trailer, so we had all the trust in the world. But then now it's been, now I guess it's been close to 10 years or so. Like
10, yeah.
Looking back on it, like there's no guardrail. It's straight down not a mountain, but a steep hillside. There's no
It's
trees.
foothills to the mountain, yeah.
Yeah, there's no trees there. We would have went straight down, no questions. And you got the butt end of that trailer right into the mountain, and essentially jackknifed us. So the back of the pickup and the front of the trailer were kind of hinging off the road, and the engine of the pickup, I think, frankly, and the horses in the back kept it from falling over. And you hit it hard enough that the horses fell. So one of the first things we did was, I think we actually kept them in there for the weight, if I remember right.
Yeah, for a while, because we weren't going anywhere at that point.
But I mean, that is just one of those things that, and I probably do a horrible job of explaining it, but it didn't, at the time, I had no issues with it. But now looking back, I was like, yeah, we could have definitely died on that one. That was call.
Yeah, that could have escalated way, way worse than it did.
Yeah, so lucky things. But I think with that, we will thank our guests for the comments. It's actually very nice because we got other people throwing some stuff in there to help with the conversation.
Yeah.
But we'll probably start doing this more on like a monthly basis. I don't know if I'm good enough to do a regular weekly thing.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, next week I don't think we'll see if we can get one in. I'm traveling next weekend to go see a really good friend in Virginia. So we'll see if I'll be back in time, at least maybe for a late episode for between you and me, and then we'll try and publish it. If not, we'll wait until the week after. But other than that, I'll give you the final comments and the sign off.
Well, that's it. Really, it's about thinking ahead, being careful. We are mortal, and even the smallest, stupidest things like your grandpa's OSHA 16 electrical cord. You can't.
Another time.
We joke about it because he had an electrical cord that was laid and coiled up, and your mother looked at that when she insisted we clean the shop out, and she said, you need to sit here and tell us what goes and what doesn't go. And he's like, okay. So he's sitting there in the middle, and he's pointing a finger, and your mother picks up this cord, and it's got electrical tape wrapped in and around it, and he's got two cords coming off of one that he has obviously put together. And she goes, this isn't real good. You've got all of these, this thing is all taped up and you've got exposed wire and you can drag this through water. And he goes, oh no, that's my OSHA 16 cord. And she goes, what do you mean OSHA 16? He goes, I violate 16 different OSHA regulations with that cord. She goes, it's going. So, you know,
he tried to save it too. He pulled it out and we caught him.
Oh,
We had to throw it away the next week.
But that motivation was, I don't want to spend money on an electrical cord, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was his motivation for that. I'll just make sure nobody's touching it or their tongue's not on an exposed piece of, you know, I mean, it's just crazy. So, but yeah, it's some good stuff. And there's a lot more out there. This is a rich mine of things that we can always talk about. So we really appreciate you guys tuning in. This is kind of fun for us. It actually is fun, or we wouldn't do it, but hopefully we'll get something out of this. And one thing we do is we thank you till you're better paid.